Thank you, Madam President. In Federalist Paper 65, which we have heard referred to quite a bit in the last 2 weeks, Alexander Hamilton warned, "The impeachment process should never be used as a partisan political weapon." He said that impeachment can, and I quote, "connect itself with the pre-existing factions and list all their animosities, partialities, influences, and interests on one side or the other. In such cases, there will always be the greatest danger that the decision will be regulated more by the comparative strength of the parties than by the real demonstrations of innocence or guilt." Today, unfortunately, over 2 centuries later, Hamilton's fears have become reality. This current impeachment process has never been about the truth, justice, or the rule of law. For my colleagues across the aisle, this is only about overturning the 2016 election, impacting the 2020 election, and gaining the Senate majority. From the start, this House process has been totally illegitimate. The articles of impeachment that the House of Representatives presented to us last month were nothing more than the fruit of a poison tree. In America, we believe in the rule of law. In America, we believe in due process. In America, we believe anyone has a right to a fair trial. In America, we believe anyone is innocent until proven guilty. However, House Democrats violated each of these foundational precepts in using the impeachment process as a partisan political weapon. Throughout the course of the House impeachment investigation, Democrats repeatedly denied President Trump due process and the fundamental rights of the accused in America. Simply put, what they did was not fair. They denied him the right to have counsel, the right to have witnesses, the right to cross-examine their witnesses, the right to see the evidence, and lastly, the right to face his accuser. Contrast that with the last 2 presidents to face impeachment. The grand jury investigation of Clinton and the Watergate investigation of Nixon were conducted in a fair manner with rights for the accused. No action was taken by the House of Representatives until the facts were clear and indisputable in both those trials. When these investigations were complete and those 2 presidents were found to have committed a crime, impeachment had bipartisan support, unlike this time. This investigation is entirely different. It was rushed and was totally partisan, with not one single House Republican voting for these 2 pitiful articles of impeachment. The impeachment trial in the Senate has been going on for the past 11 days. Unlike in the House, the Senate upheld its constitutional duty to conduct a fair trial. The Democratic House managers had the opportunity to present their case. Then, for the first time in this sad affair, the president and his team, his lawyers, had an opportunity to present their case, their defense. Neither Article 1, abuse of power, nor Article 2, obstruction of Congress, qualify as constitutional reasons for impeachment. It's pretty simple. I'm not a lawyer, but if you look at the facts, it's very direct. The Constitution clearly lays out 4 explicit reasons for impeaching a president. Even corruption does not qualify under these definitions. It's very clear. They itemized treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanors. And they explained to us in the hearings, another translation in modern terms, using the Old English for misdemeanors, is crimes. It's another word for crime. The charges against President Trump don't come close to any of these specified requirements. It's as simple as that. The House really was beginning to make up new constitutional law. Each of the other 3 presidents that has faced impeachment was charged with committing a crime. President Trump is the first president ever to face impeachment that was never accused of any crime in these proceedings whatsoever. These 2 articles of impeachment simply do not qualify as reasons to impeach any president. Further, Democratic House managers did not prove their case for either of the 2 articles of impeachment. The entire case for abuse of power is centered around the June 25, 2019 phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. The Democrats allege President Trump only asked for help in investigating the Burisma situation for political gain. It's clear now, after hearing all the testimony, that the primary motivation to ask Zelensky to look into the Biden-Burisma corruption issue was to root out corruption in the Ukraine. Ukraine has had a long history of corruption, and this president was well within his rights to ask for help in rooting out this fairly obvious example of corruption. Democrats completely failed to prove the president's request was for political gain only. Regarding the obstruction of Congress article, every president has the right to exert executive privilege to protect our national interest and the separation of powers. Honestly, this article should have never been received in the Senate in the first place. We should have dismissed this article out of hand. It simply is absurd. Arguing that President Trump obstructed Congress by claiming his rights is unacceptable and would fundamentally weaken this right for future presidents. When President Trump exerted executive privilege, his right under the Constitution, Democrats could simply have pursued the subpoenas. That's the way the founders laid it out. They could have pursued the subpoenas in court. For some reason, the House Democrats chose not to do that. House Democrats were in such a rush that they sent the Senate an incomplete case. That's why I believe the Senate should not have accepted them in the first place, because the process was illegitimate, inappropriate, and incomplete. Bottom line, House Democrats simply did not do their job. In the Clinton investigation, the House investigated for over 400 days before they brought articles of impeachment. There was a conviction. In this case, barely 100. The Democratic House managers brought the articles of impeachment and claimed they had overwhelming proof. Immediately, in their opening statement, they had overwhelming proof. However, right away, even with that, they immediately demanded the Senate call witnesses that the House had already chosen not to call, like John Bolton. They could have easily called him, but chose not to, claiming it would take too long. Instead, they demanded that the Senate call additional witnesses that were not included in the House investigation. The Constitution requires that the House conduct the investigation, including calling witnesses, taking depositions, collecting evidence, and the Senate is charged to rule based on the evidence the House provides. This was designed this way for a very specific reason, very practical reason. In the House, committees can investigate these charges while the rest of the House continues to do their legislative work. Unfortunately, in the Senate, when articles of impeachment are brought and sent to the Senate, by constitutional law, must stop what it's doing, must open an impeachment hearing. And while in a formal impeachment hearing, the Senate cannot do anything else by law. It goes into legislative shutdown by law. In this case, if we were to call additional witnesses, then we would be setting a dangerous precedent for every future case. The House could theoretically make up any flimsy charge they wanted with no investigation, no witnesses, no testimony, no evidence whatsoever, and then send the articles to the Senate and expect the Senate to do their job. That's not what the founders wrote. That's not what they had in mind. It would open up a Pandora's box, shut the Senate down indefinitely, and you can see why the founders did not want to go down that road. That's not how they built this process. For the sake of our very system of government, we cannot yield to this unconstitutional effort. The House actually did call 17 witnesses. They sent over 193 videos, 28,000 pages of documents. Ultimately, a majority in this body concluded it was unnecessary to hear from any of those witnesses. Again, on top of that, the impeachment rules do not require the Senate to call witnesses. That's the House job. It's just that simple. Let's be very clear. This entire impeachment process has been a purely partisan political stunt perpetrated by House Democrats. It truly is an embarrassment, and exactly what Alexander Hamilton warned us all against. It's no secret. Democrats have been trying to obstruct this president from day one. On the day President Trump was inaugurated, the headline of the Washington Post right here in town claimed that the campaign to impeach this president has already begun. House Democrat manager Adam Schiff, in his opening remarks, said, "You can't trust elections. That's why we have impeachment." Really? Really? That's absurd. The president has done nothing to warrant this impeachment process. He must be acquitted. If we let House Democrats get away with this today, we're setting a dangerous precedent for the future. Already, we're in an era of impeachment. In the first 180 years, we only had one impeachment case that came to the Senate and investigated in the House. In the last 45 years, we've had 3 investigated in the House, and 2 have actually made it to the Senate. If we let Democrats improperly use the impeachment process as a partisan political weapon, then it will only get worse in the future. I call on my colleagues today, I plead with my colleagues today to reject this unconstitutional effort and vote to acquit Donald J. Trump of these illegitimate and unconstitutional articles of impeachment.